Love is an intercessory presence. That is the title of this session. Now, some may be wondering, what is that, an intercessory presence? Where are we going? Before we go there, let's pick up the thread from the previous session, where we took a closer look at the heart than most people do. Certainly closer than most of science does. And as we got closer to the heart, the truth about the heart, we saw how we might be selling ourselves a bit short by thinking the heart is simply a muscle to pump blood throughout our body. Like so many perspectives we have about physical things in life within the current paradigm, we can see how much things can be upside down and backwards. But this is entirely understandable when examining things simply as physical objects and not experiencing the full phenomenon of the object. We need to experience how something is placed within the largest context imaginable if we're going to see the whole picture and attain holy knowing, which is my term for knowledge that is obtained by using all the capacities of the whole self. All of them. Who does that? Who has holy knowing? At the current state of science, we see things too much as fractions of a whole. Everything is being separate from each other. Why? Because of ego. Because the current state of the ego for most people is that their ego is separate and distinct from everything else. And you know what? They're 100% correct. The ego is distinct and needs to experience itself as separate from everything else. And this is a beautiful thing, because it is setting the egoic self free. And it explains why the current state of science is the way it is, with all its divisions and subdivisions of subdivisions, because this is the current state of the ego's evolution. It also does much to explain the unbeautiful things that are a result of this, how separation leads to lack of integration, lack of wholeness, lack of harmony, and leads to destruction. So until the ego finishes its ego educare, that is the education of the ego, and is led out into its next stage, where it learns to reintegrate into the whole, then we will continue to inflict our own personal style of egotism on each other and the planet, until the ego, with its egotism, passes through the eye of the needle, passes through the small hole to the holy knowing on the other side, which is to say, go through a personal death and resurrection of the ego, which is to say, graduates from the school of love. Everything on the outside, including the state of science, will be a reflection of where we are on the inside. To be clear, I am by no means anti-science. It's just that science needs to be re-spiritualized. The same as everything else on the planet, including the planet itself, has to be ultimately re-spiritualized as part of the involutionary, devolutionary, evolutionary processes. With regards to the re-spiritualization of the heart, as my teacher Dennis Klocek would sometimes say, it's not so much about the meat as the movement. The meat is meat, but the heart's movement is an echo of cosmic motion, as Rudolf Steiner called it, the expansion and contraction of the universe itself within your heart. The expansion and contraction, which I believe, as pointed out in the previous session, are taking place simultaneously in the universe, which is easy to understand when you consider that above the level of duality, where everything is truly singular, a singularity, all qualities are together at once. So expansion and contraction, as qualities of time and space, exist together simultaneously at a, what you could call, trans-dualistic point. We just experience them in linear time. Our heart experiences them one after the other in the four dimensions: expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. I have no way of proving this scientifically, and I have never heard anyone else say this, but we will see in time if my theory is proven true. In the meantime, when we connect to Source, we are beyond all duality, beyond movement, beyond expansion and contraction. There we find the stillness of singularity, the real singularity, of all things merged. And the amazing thing is that the stillness of there is here, accessible right now, right here, in the center of your heart, between the beats, between the chambers, in the space between. And that is what the Zen Buddhists and Hindu yogis and all the mystic masters of the past were endeavoring to connect with. This was the eye of the needle they were trying to pass their ego through. Why? Let's take a moment again to consider a little bit more about this hollow aspect of the heart. The primary purpose of the heart is not to pump blood. Steiner says if there were a parallel between the heart and a pump, it would be closer to a ram pump that blocks the flow until pressure builds and a lever is triggered, opening the passageways for the flow through. That would make the heart more similar to a pressure pump than a propulsion pump. But even this analogy is insufficient in characterizing the true nature of your heart. What is at the center of the heart? Nothing. Nothing is at the center of your heart. At the center is emptiness, empty cavities, hollows, holes that can be filled or not. Sometimes they are full and sometimes they are not. The heart works primarily to keep the center of itself empty, blocking the inward flow. Then when the moment is right, it allows it to pass, sending it along its merry way with a spiraling action that emulates the fundamental signature of the universe, the spiral, all the while making itself empty again. So what is it that is so important about emptiness? Well, we cannot answer this without taking a moment to consider women's cleavage. Yes, the space between a woman's two breasts. What is it? It's just space between two breasts. It's actually nothing in itself. If one breast were gone, so would the cleavage. It's the space that's created by the two breasts, like the space between two notes. Well, you might say that's nothing. And you're right. It's nothing but empty space. But for a lot of people, that space, the cleavage, can have a lot of power. In fact, it can become the gravitational center of a room. All the men's eyes just moving toward it, almost as if involuntary muscles in the eyes can't help but be magnetically attracted to that empty void, the nothingness between two breasts. Same with Zen Buddhist monks. The monks feel the magnetic attraction to the empty void, and they meditate on and in empty spaces, rooms that are empty, except for perhaps their tatami mat to meditate on, so they can cultivate this sense of emptiness within themselves. Why? Well, this question takes us again to the very first session of Series 1, where we looked at the questions, is there a reason to live? Is there a reason to love? And we came to the conclusion that it is all about becoming a free being, a free ego, a freego. And that our free will is the most important commodity we have and need to protect. And so this constant emptying of the heart, which takes place on a physical level, but also on other levels of our being, if we're paying attention, has everything to do with our freedom of will. What do I mean by that? It is up to us, our free will, as to what we fill our heart, including on other levels of our being. Again, if we're paying attention. In Zen Buddhist practices, which I worked with at one point in my spiritual evolution, puts an emphasis on nothingness and emptiness. So much so, this idea of emptiness is found demonstrated throughout Japan. Empty rooms containing nothing are exhibited everywhere, which is quite interesting considering how small Japan is with such a large population, where living space is at a premium. I was quite struck by the importance of this aesthetic, how it holds such an important place in Japanese culture to honor emptiness, the void. This is referred to in the Japanese language as ma, M-A, ma. What's interesting to consider from the perspective of the evolution of consciousness is that these ancient practices could be considered as preparatory practices, gaining a sense of nothingness, emptying oneself, becoming devoid of anything. Why? So we could proceed to the next stage. So the ego could enter the next stage, come upon the world stage that is prepared to receive it as part of the involution evolution. And so the real question to be asking from the perspective of modern day consciousness, a very critical question, what comes after the void? What comes after we have made empty the space? With what to fill it? What comes after we have taken ourselves through an ego death and resurrection, and then are left with the choice as to what we fill our heart and mind, to what we apply our ego, that it may become edified with materials worthy of its existence, rather than the false foundations of earthly Maya. What comes after the void? Something to ponder while sitting on the toilet. What to fill up with after emptying. As for the heart, it's clear that the heart's role as an organizer, it is taking care of the incoming and outgoing of your life. But that is much more than blood. The heart is a multi-level, multitasking organizer. When it comes to what is incoming, we could say it boils down to two main levels. First, what the heart mediates vertically from the wide universe in which it is woven. This is a big subject which we'll unpack in this session. But the heart also has to mediate what the world coming at it on the horizontal would like to put into it. This is the things aimed at you from what I call the three marketeers. The three marketeers are all gunning at your intelligence. One wants to hook into your gut's intelligence with what food it can sell to your belly. The second is selling ideas to your head. And the third marketeer is aiming for the bullseye of your heart. The three marketeers. An example of what this looks like in practice is that the first marketeer works to get your attention, catch your eye with ideas. Then the second marketeer excites your emotions. Then the third marketeer wants to activate your will, take you by the hand, so to speak, to reach for your wallet, to buy, more shopping, which we all know is the purpose of life anyway. And the three marketeers know it too. However, they want you to buy what they're selling so they can have the cash. And so they use the crafty marketeer ways, piggybacking on the world's Maya of illusion. That's all about the incoming. As for what is outgoing from the heart, that is the focus of this session and the next, which is called Love is Speaking, and brings us to the really big question, what is the role of the human in the cosmos? We've already looked at what the human is seeking as an egoic being, to be a free being, a freego. But when that has been secured to a sufficient degree, what is the role of the egoic self? What is its role in relationship to the rest of the cosmos? Which basically means the relationship to everything other than the self. This session is called Love is an Intercessory Presence, because the human can hold an intercessory presence. We can make intercession for the horizontal axis of existence to the planet by holding an intercessory presence to the vertical, to the cosmos. Let me rephrase that from we can make an intercessory presence to we need to make an intercessory presence. This is something we need to be doing because this is part of our role in the cosmos. We are designed to be doing. It's part of the planet. We don't have to be making intercessory presence, right? Because we have freedom of will. But we can and should recognize the need to and do in order to fulfill our role in the planet. And we can recognize the need for this because of one simple indicator. The quality of our relationships on the horizontal are a direct reflection of the quality of our relationship to the vertical. And if you look at the current state of the planet, you can see the urgent need to crisp up, straighten up our vertical alignment. We will never manifest the fullness of what is available in the unmanifest realm of infinite possibilities if we don't first reconcile ourselves to the source. First things first. Getting more connected and comfortable with our own genius and the omnidirectional capacities we are endowed with. I'm sure sometime in the future, when we look back on these times, they will be regarded in the history books as a time where humans, at least some humans, were really starting to pull themselves out of the swampaverse, to awaken to the galactic scenario, and begin building themselves, edifying themselves in a future-looking way as an intercessory presence. Some see beyond the physical heart because they experience the awakening presence of love within it, and they follow the lead of love to see where it goes, as it takes them beyond romantic love to other levels of love. And they see how this allows an intercessory presence to benefit all. We're really speaking about the next step in the evolution of consciousness. This is something that can be taken in hand more than our physical evolution, at least for now. We're not just interested in activating our brain potential, because ultimately we want to achieve brain-free thinking, body-free thinking, cognitive activity that is not bound up with our physical processes and body-based activities and body-based desires. It makes sense, doesn't it? More at hand is the question of how do we use our mind? We know our heart can work without a brain, and so can our mind. So most importantly right now is how can we use the heart of the mind? How to train ourselves to think, to then interface with our brain and the whole interface of our physical panel. Here's an interesting book, a classic in its field, The Intelligence of the Cosmos, by a foremost pioneer in understanding the universe as primarily one thing, first and foremost. Physical? No. Intelligent. By Ervin Laszlo. In this book, The Intelligence of the Cosmos, which I would like to call the intelligence of the cosmos that created us, because there's no debating that. The cosmos created us. We are created out of the cosmos. There's no need for debate between evolutionists and creationists. There's a middle path here. It's agreeable all around that the cosmos created us. But the thing that has yet to be determined is just how intelligent is the cosmos. Is there an IQ test for the intelligence of the cosmos? The title of this session is Love is an Intercessory Presence. The point is, how can we become better at connecting to the intelligence of the cosmos via our vertical axis, so we can become a loving intercessory presence on the horizontal axis? We are to be conductors of consciousness between the cosmos and the earth. Christ consciousness is a term used to refer to a consciousness that is conducted with love. If out of our free will we choose to not take up that role, then what? We could still become conscious very conscious of the power available, but without using the power in a way that is coming from a heart filled with love, it could be a misuse and abuse of power. Misuse the power, and then what? Become what? Evil geniuses, as I spoke of in a previous session. Movies are full of these characters, but they are far from fictitious. In the Batman trilogy, for example, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises, the Joker rises. Not because he's joking, but because he's very serious. He's very serious about manifesting his evil genius, and he has no qualms about doing that, because his only moral code is to expose the fact that everybody else is operating as an evil genius, including Bruce Wayne himself, the Batman. We all have the potential. And if you had an honest look at yourself, you'll see your untrained, uneducated ego is quite capable of using the intelligence of the universe within yourself to do egotistically driven things to serve yourself. The Joker asks, what else is there in life? Well, love as an intercessory presence. We need to keep in mind the various levels of our being, and in particular, levels of our heart. The heart is obviously performing a physical function, incoming and outgoing on the horizontal plane, keeping the physical body alive, which allows the physical body to interface with other physical bodies on the horizontal plane. But what about the vertical? We've already looked at the heart's unconscious relationship with the cosmos, expanding and contracting, incoming and outgoing on levels other than the physical. Is it possible to have a conscious relationship with the cosmos? Is the cosmos conscious enough for that? This is actually the cutting edge question of science. But let's first look back in time to see what our ancestors were up to. And I do literally mean up to. There is a very clear line through history to show humans were up to securing something of a vertical relationship in the environment. We see this in the megalithic structures that still stand today. The menhirs, standing stones such as Stonehenge, obelisks, stone pillars, pyramids all over the world, ziggurats, these mammoth stone structures, temples of all kinds throughout the ages, the cathedrals of the Middle Ages, all doing what? Aspiring to be conscious connections to the cosmos. If we consider the spires of the cathedrals pointing upward to the cosmos, what's a spire doing? Aspiring. It's aspiring to have connection with the cosmos, an antenna of sorts. So is everything else that preceded it, back to the menhirs and mounds of antiquity. That's what our ancestors were up to. Looking back even further, before religious texts were even written down, one can imagine how humans spent a lot of time observing nature and observing the connection between the activities of the plant world, for example, and the activities of the cosmos. They observed how things grew up and they grew down. They observed this two-way directional movement, and they observed how this growth went in accord with the motion of the cosmos, cosmic motion. And as they observed this, they started to make notes, quite literally, making markers on the earth to mark how the plants worked with the cosmos as intercessory beings between earth and the heavens. This evolved into nature worship, worshiping nature, recognizing nature's activity as an intercessor between the earth and cosmos. Then in time, these markers, such as at Stonehenge, became places of intercession themselves. Rites and rituals of worship were performed by humans to enhance the quality of intercession. So crops and cattle could be even more endowed with the intelligence of the cosmos coming into the earth. A second type of ancient religious activity alongside nature worship is ancestor worship, the veneration of ancestors. The idea behind ancestor worship is that the ancestors had already lived on earth. They have lived their lives, gone through their experiences on the horizontal, gained whatever wisdom they could, then died. However, with ancestor worship, the dead are not dead. The body has died, but the ancestors are on the other side of the threshold, the other side of the veil of the senses, and can still be contacted, conversed with, and tapped into for their wisdom, experience, and yes, their intercession. The backbone of ancestor worship is to keep the connection alive, even though they are dead. And so prayers and offerings to the ancestors is still part of religious activity in parts of the world, which is what religion is meant to do. Religion, from the Latin word religare, means to reconnect, stay connected. And so nature worship and ancestor worship mark some of the oldest religious activity of antiquity. They were the ways to maintain connection with the greater cosmos and receive support of the larger reality, the spirit of the earth as sought through nature worship, and the spirit of the heavens through keeping the connection with the dead alive. Evidently, there was much innovation with these two pillars of religion, seeking to secure the vertical axis and seeing what blessings could be engendered on the horizontal axis of life. Think of the mounds of the Druids, burial mounds where they put the body of the dead in the earth. These created mounds rose upwards. Same with the building of cairns, these conical rock piles, sometimes for burying the dead, but primarily for their own sake of moving energy in a vertical direction, directing it upward like an antenna to receive a signal downward. This elevated the sense of connection to nature, to the dead, and ultimately to the cosmos, all the while teaching them to sculpt space, becoming masters of time and space. The intercessory activity to the ancestors secured their connection to the past, the wisdom of the past, and the rites of nature secured their connection to the present, the forces of the earth in the present. And both of these pillars together secured guidance into the uncertain future, all the while faithful that there is a planet. There is a planet for the future. And so we can see in study of history that humans continually worked at ways to build and establish a vertical relationship, as seen in the megalithic structures of menhirs, stone circles, obelisks, pyramids, temples, and cathedrals. The massive structures of ancient Mesopotamia, known as ziggurats, have the form of a terraced compound with successfully elevated levels. An example of a ziggurat is the White Temple of Uruk. The ziggurat is the base on which the White Temple is set. Its purpose is to get the temple closer to the heavens. The Mesopotamians believed that these temples connected heaven and earth. In fact, the ziggurat at Babylon was known as Etemenanki, which means house of the foundation of heaven and earth. Why so much effort to establish connection? Why not just let nature do her thing? Just let the trees and mountains do the aspiring for us. Why do humans need to get involved in the connection between earth and cosmos? Don't humans just mess things up? They mess up culture, mess up climate, mess up themselves. Well, the alchemists of Egypt used the credo, as above, so below. For some reason, they thought something above should be reflected below. And so humans increasingly got involved in the work of establishing a connection, building these edifices. But the amazing thing is that it becomes increasingly clear that it was the human itself who was meant to be the main connector, to be the bridge between the cosmos and the earth. And this is the meaning of titles given to religious figures such as the Pope, who is called Pontifex, which translates as bridge builder. And why is it considered that a bridge builder is needed? The view was that the creation had become estranged from the cosmos that created it, and needed to become reconciled, religare, reconnected. Why? Well, back to the same thing repeated from the first session of the School of Love, freedom of will. We can become disconnected because of our freedom of will, and in order to become reconnected, it will take freedom of will. Humans have what nothing else has in this creation, freedom of will. Again, looking at history, you can see how individual humans rose up to lead people and became themselves the bridge between the universe and the people. Pontifexes, pharaohs, gurus, kings and queens, all in different ways, but ultimately the same thing, giving a sense of levity to the people, helping them to rise above the earth, to make a step toward becoming a universal human. These leadership figures, some of them no doubt evil geniuses, misleading people, which is their free will prerogative, but others working in benevolent ways, marked how in the evolution of consciousness, the human was slowly awakening and taking up its role as a connector to the cosmos, and had the freedom to become the intercessory presence of love upon the earth. To a certain degree, it happened as a collective effort, but ultimately it is all based on the capacity of the individual. And moving forward, we will do this even more, not out of an archaic revival of mass rituals and tribal mentality, but based on the initiative of the individual. Things have evolved. We have evolved. And now it is all coming down to you, or rather, up to you. The coming down is up to you. You as an individual connector. You as a pillar of the earth. You as a pillar of society. You as a product of the cosmos that created you, endowed with a heart, the center of centers in your own being. In its own right, your heart is a center of the universe. And in its multifaceted, multi-leveled design is hardwired to be a connector to it all. Like so many people, I have a fascination with the mysteries of Egypt. I've studied and given talks on the subject and even hope one day to make it to Egypt. The Egyptians were people who were aware of the multi-dimensionality of the cosmos and themselves, and so lived on multiple dimensions simultaneously. And so do we, but the difference is that they were much more aware of it. And this is seen in the edifices they constructed. They took the concept of a pyramid, which had been around for millennia, and initially as mounds and menhirs, standing stones, cairns, and so forth, and perfected it to a quintessential degree. I have a series of talks on this on my YouTube channel, Spiritual Science as Social Activism and Self-Initiation, so I won't go into the details of the design of the Great Giza Pyramid as the #1 wonder of the world. But a lot is revealed in it, and it exposing really the reality of this main alchemical credo that comes from ancient Egypt: as above, so below, and also as below, so above. Here we see the duality of above and below. But what is the mediator? What is in the middle of the above and the below? If one looks closely at the Great Giza Pyramid from a certain perspective, one will see it is threefold. One will see in the bottom portion the metabolic engine, tapping the motion of the earth, the vibrations of the Nile running underneath it through the intestinal-like tunnels. And the upper portion has tuned bars of granite to vibrate up through the peak of the pyramid, the power of the point, and connect with cosmic motion. But in the middle, in the heart of the Great Giza Pyramid, is empty chambers, not unlike the chambers of the heart. Empty except for one thing: a sarcophagus. Not for the burial of a king or queen. That is a misrepresentation by myopic Egyptologists. The pyramids of Egypt were not glorified burial mounds for pharaohs. Yes, they were places of death, but of initiatory death. Death of the ego, so something new and higher could enter in, to fill the empty space, the place of the void. When the Great Pyramid was fully operational, something went up and something came down, making the activity of intercession, and all the planet was blessed by this, all supported by the pyramidal design of the #1 wonder of the world. Which is why I have an example of a pyramid here, one that I love because it's actually threefold in its design, which is really what a pyramid is, with a base or foundation, the metabolic region connecting to the earth. In the middle, the heart, where the fire exists, the empty space, the empty chambers that get ignited with magical properties. And then finally, the peaked roof, where the point connects, the power of the point connects to the cosmos. But the most amazing thing is that despite the architectural marvels of this relic of the ancient world, we as a species have evolved in our capacity to create intercessional connection. It is in our design. We and our own verticality, with a head or capstone on top, like a pyramid, a metabolic region below, connecting to the earth, and in the middle, the center of centers, the heart, which is what some believe the word pyramid means. Pyra, mid, fire in the middle. We are an architectural marvel. We are a vertical edifice intended to make a connection with the cosmos. We are designed as part of the planet, to connect our consciousness, our earth consciousness, with cosmic consciousness. Which means you are now the number one wonder of the world. Even though we are not finished in our construction, and we have lots of work to do to fulfill this role, this is the planet. This role of the human in the cosmos. We may seem small and feel small, but it's all a matter of perspective. As we look closer, we can see it is our role to be the connector, the bridge builder, the pontifex between earth and cosmos. Why is this important to understand? Who says that depression is becoming the number 2 burden of disease in the world? Who? That's right, who? The World Health Organization says that depression is becoming the number 2 burden of disease in the world. What is depression? It's 2 words, de and pressed. Depress, pressed down. A sense of being pressed down. What causes this? Some say a chemical imbalance causes it. So doctors prescribe other chemicals to correct the imbalance. But it's a chicken or the egg scenario. Did the chemical imbalance cause the depression, or did depression cause the chemical imbalance? For sure, if a person is not eating well and throws off the body's chemistry, the body will power down and the mind doesn't have a habitation in which to do its thing. Or consuming other chemical substances and becoming intoxicated can affect innate chemicals in the body, including the blood, causing impairment of the body and mind. Or toxicity in our environment, which we're all exposed to, making detoxifying a part of the modern lifestyle. But is the sense of being depressed simply a physical thing? When you feel depressed, feel pressed down and can't get up, what part feels depressed and can't get up? It might feel like your body can't get your butt out of bed, can't go for a walk. But is it your body that's depressed? Is it your butt? Is it your feet that are depressed? No, depression most often feels rooted in the heart. People say, I feel depressed, or I am depressed. It's a feeling and emotional state. We lack emotion, no motion of energy, no motion of feeling. We're basically feeling stalled. So how do we get unstalled? How do we get back into gear? How to get undepressed? Firstly, a big thing that is often overlooked is to get one's mind off of oneself. Secondly, get your mind onto something else or someone else, but in a certain way. It means getting into gear with the thing we're designed to do, acting as intercessors between earth and cosmos. Therein lies a great secret in overcoming the gravity of earth, which includes spiritual gravity, which can cause us all in a sense of being pulled down, depressed by the things of the world. But by getting in balance with the forces of levity, spiritual anti-gravity, so to speak, by becoming a two-way intercessor between the cosmos and earth, the thing you are designed to do, you are then in the vertical axis, mediating the two-way flow, the downward flow, balanced by the upward flow, the new two-way connection between the above and the below, the heavens and the earth. This may sound like a bit of a stretch, quite literally, that anything in us can have contact with the cosmos, with anything beyond the earth, beyond our atmosphere, or even beyond the ceiling of our room, which we lie there looking at blankly, feeling depressed by everything. It all seems so far away. But in verticality, We are there by design. Our head is the electric pole of our being, which is connected to the electric universe. At the opposite pole, we are connected to the magnetic earth, and the heart mediates in the middle of the electric pole and the magnetic pole, which in turn are tapped to the electric universe on the one hand and the magnetic earth on the other. Which is why the heart is in the middle. And this place in the middle is a place where there is the greatest electromagnetic field in the body, much bigger than the brain. And this electromagnetic field is a medium to work as a transceiver, which is what the heart is and does. As it sits at the center, it is receiving and transmitting things through the breath, through the blood, water, warmth, electromagnetism, and as Bob Marley puts it, also the natural mystic flowing through the air. This all takes place in a pyramid, and certainly in the Great Giza Pyramid. The pyramid, fire in the middle, was an electromagnetic fire, not a literal fire. They weren't chopping down trees and burning them in the sarcophagus and sending smoke up through the little chimneys on the roof. The electromagnetism they created ignited an even higher octave of fire, cosmic fire, based on the interaction of the cosmic motion with the earthly motion. It was like striking a match that ignited spiritual fire in the middle, in the heart of the pyramid, creating an intercessory presence. And when we apply this holy knowing as the new number one wonder of the world, replacing the Great Giza Pyramid, which is now rather defunct anyways, we will be healthy, whole and holy, undepressed, and balanced chemically, electromagnetically, multidimensionally. So how do we increase our function as an intercessory presence, which could be the prime means of overcoming depression? And for your information, that statement has not been evaluated by the FDA. What was the nature of things going on in temples, cathedrals, mystery centers? In a word, prayer. Yes, prayer. I know that word may sound like an outdated word and went the way of the old temples, but in the new temple, it's needed as well, because it is still about an intercessory presence. Whether we're referring to the mounds, menhirs, physical temples, or spiritual temples, prayer is, as an intercessory presence, still important. What does that look like? Love as an intercessory presence, working with spiritual levity and spiritual gravity, becoming a master of space and time, and doing it out of freedom. It first means realizing you are here to be a pillar of the temple. You have a place in the new temple of the one body. And hopefully this talk has convinced you of this. We're talking about going beyond the brick and mortar temples of the past and into the new temple of the one body. But just like the temples of old, they need pillars in them to hold things up, to be an intermediary presence. The new temple needs you to be there to help hold things up. How to do this? How to approach prayer? Firstly, remembering the primacy of self-love from the first series. Pray for yourself. Lift yourself in prayer so you can then lift others in prayer. How to pray is something we'll look at in a second, but it needs to be done based on the right attitude toward it. Attitude determines outcome. To get the right attitude of veneration and humility, it helps to do the daily Raksha review, which I introduced in the session called Love is Learning. Reviewing your day in reverse near the end of each day. This will develop the right attitude and basis for becoming a loving, intercessory, prayerful presence like the Great Giza Pyramid with fire in the middle. Prayer is a way to love. In the epistles of the Apostle Paul, he says, pray without ceasing. He obviously doesn't mean to be speaking prayers 24/7. It's an attitude and doesn't necessarily require words or could include words. You could think of it as a form of magic, which sometimes uses the power of words, which we'll be looking at in the next session called Love is Speaking. Prayer is a creative act, and as with any creativity, should not be kept in a box. But one example of how it might look, and we'll do this in a moment, is to take some time in a quiet place to become still and close your eyes. Ask for a face to come into the space. Someone's face you know, or perhaps someone you don't know. Hold this face with your hands, symbolically speaking, and feed this face from your heart. From your heart to their heart. Make intercession for them. This is not overstepping anyone's freedom of will. This is an offering. So hold it as such. You're working on a higher level with them. You're more than a shoulder to lean on. You are an intercessory presence. Stay in that space as long as you feel the flow. Then allow another face to come. This may all happen quite quickly, or with some people you may hold them for a long time. Do this with your family members, your housemates, your students, your employees. Be open to whoever comes, allowing you to love and hold them as an intercessory presence. Develop empathy, a neutral zone within yourself, where there is no sympathy or antipathy, just empathy and compassion, so something can flow through the space, through you, unimpeded by anything less than the higher intelligence of the cosmos. This also answers the question, what comes after the void? Revelation. Revelation comes after the void. Revelation comes to fill the void, to fill the heart that has emptied itself of itself. As we saw in the previous session, unless I love something, it cannot reveal itself to me. True knowledge is a revelation. And once we have emptied ourselves, done away with our egotism, and made our egos ready to receive from something higher than the ego and the senses, it can receive revelation, which is what an intercessor does. Prayer is a two-way communication, something going up, something coming down, all an inner revelation beyond the senses. And as you live the words, pray without ceasing, this flow will become a consistent thing, which is what a pillar needs to be, consistent. And you will find your role as a pillar of love will grow. Your role as an intercessory presence, because love is an intercessory presence, which is love in action. Thanks for listening. So first I'm going to give you the love assignment for this session of the School of Love, and then we will do it together. Practice being an intercessory presence. Prayer can become a rich and enlivening practice when entered into as a natural role we as humans are designed to do. The main goal is to develop a sense of being a loving intercessory presence. We can do this for our family, friends, people we know, or even don't know. A suggestion to get started is to sit in silence with eyes closed and ask for the face of someone you can be an intercessory presence for. See what face comes. Hold it symbolically in your hands, or visualize your hands holding the other. Feed their face from your heart, sending out from your heart. This will feed their heart and make spiritual intercession for them. Don't forget to do this for yourself. Observe what effects you feel from doing this and how it changes things in the manifest realm. Keep building as a loving intercessory presence. Now, to do this together, as I suggest, come into silence, come into stillness, come into emptiness. Eyes closed, we'll sit here and ask for the face of someone who we can be an intercessory presence for. See what face comes. Receiving the face of this person, symbolically holding it in your hands. The hands and the arms are an extension of the heart. We feed this face from our heart through our hands to feed their heart. Just continue in silence and stillness, holding this space of compassion and empathy. This could last for a short while or could last for a long while. But just let go of this first person and then ask for a second person to come into the space. And it doesn't matter whether we understand why this person or not. The thing is, this is what's coming into the space. This is what we're being given. Again, hold their face symbolically in your hands with compassion, love, sending love from your heart to them, to their heart. Again, this could last a long time, or it could be short. But let's move on to a third person, asking for another face to come into the space, receive into our hands and heart. We're receiving someone on the horizontal, but we are performing intercessory presence, performing prayer to connect, reconnect with the cosmos. We'll let this face go. This is something you can practice longer, but we want to do it one more time, and this time receive the face of yourself into the space, taking this face of yourself in your own hands to perform intercessory presence. Enjoying the feelings that flow through you, flow to you and through you from the cosmos, the intelligence of the cosmos, communion with the cosmos. And then when you feel that the flow has peaked and ended, bringing yourself back to your senses. Thank you for being a part of this session. I thank you for performing this very important role that we're designed to do as the number one wonder of the world. Keep on building, keep on practicing, and until next time, peace and love.